welcome back to the latest episode of the Master of None podcast. I am your host, as always, Stephen Murphy, joined by the regular rugby crew. We're back together. The trio's back. We've got Westy and new father, Sam. Sam, has your life changed? You have a new, what do you call it? Outlook on life?
I thought you were talking, what do you call it? Daughter?
Maybe one of those things, little people.
Small human?
Puppies?
She's been outside of that Leinster game last week, she's been a good luck charm. Liverpool won away in Old Trafford. Connacht won away in Thomond. Like, what more can you ask for your first week of life?
Yeah, but you don't want to set a false reality as a Connacht fan. It's going to be rough out there.
Her first day of life, we got hammered by Leinster, so she's seen the reality.
She was in hospital, you see. She wasn't around for that. So it's only since she came home that the good luck has started to come over all the teams that I support. And, Canes are winning, Liverpool are winning, Connacht are winning. It's all happening now that Ash is alive. So
yeah, it is weird when the Canes are winning. That's, something's up.
Mental, but no, it's great. It's good crack. And she's keeping me very honest. Like, I think I'm like, oh yeah, settle down now, watch the rugby. And then it just kind of starts moving and shaking over here, and I have to draw my eyes away. So my what happened might not be exactly on point as usually is today, but I've only watched the Connacht game twice. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Westy, how is life as not a father?
Pretty good. I've had the Connacht game on repeat since Friday, so
yeah,
pretty much perfect. Yeah,
Joe was great. I did what I want, Westy. How great was that, huh?
Joe's great about this weekend being selfish.
Yeah.
Selfish,
do you know what? I slept too well last night. I would say I slept too well. I was over rested. Do you know what I mean? It's tough out there though. I'll battle on.
I haven't had anybody else's piss and shit on me at all week.
Which is strange for you, Westy.
Westy, you had a date on Friday night, so I know that's a lie.
Westy's into some freaky shit.
No comment.
No comment.
But yes.
But we do have rugby to talk about, not piss and shit. We have a Connacht win, ladies and gentlemen. Guess who's back this week? The Rainbow Cup as the best competition ever. Woo! Let's do it.
Can I just say quickly, like, I've given the Rainbow Cup a little bit of flack. It's not obviously anyone's dream growing up to win the Rainbow Cup. Neither was it anyone's dream.
Speak for yourself.
It was never anyone's dream to win the Pro 14 growing up, because they just invented that a couple of years ago as well. But one thing I think is, like, the more people say it's not a great competition, the worse it's going to get. Like, it's the only rugby that's on. This time last year, we were giving out because we were watching Rugby Bio, or like gold rugby on Air Sport, and there was nothing on. We might as well embrace it, especially now the Connacht are back winning. I'm all in again.
Yeah, well, it'd be interesting to get this take if Connacht were 0 from 3 from the first 3 games, but I'll take your word for it.
But
Sam.
I do think that, like, it's just, we had no rugby on last year. We were doing podcast reviews on 2003 World Cup final, and this year we have live rugby, and people are going, I'd say pack it in now, yeah, and just rest up for the summer. Like, no, it's live rugby. It's there. It's the provinces you support. You might as well get behind it. Sure, like, no one knows what's going on. It's something to watch anyway, and it's actually been the most exciting tournament out of any of the club rugby we've had in the last few years.
Yeah, there is some great games, and there was, when we talk about, will the Interpros be the same in this competition? But they've all had serious bite to them. There's always been a bust up nearly in every game. But we'll start with the Munster Connacht game. Obviously, a very rare win for Connacht in Thomond, coming out on top, 24 points to 20. That's the second win since '86, I think, was the year that they threw out there. And yeah, a real bite in this game, which is, as Connacht fans, we have been asking this from the team, Westy. We kind of wanted that bit of, being a bit of a bastard, which we've complimented Munster on before, and we actually saw that from this Connacht team this weekend, didn't we?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's definitely a lot of built-up frustration in Connacht kind of from the year. Like, this is about our 4th time probably in the last 12 months playing Munster. First one, we got a couple of red cards, and it was just a bit of a bad day for everyone involved. And then the other 2 kind of games we've had against them this year have been pretty close. We've kind of been thereabouts for most of it. Bad decision on a scrum at the end of the game in the sports ground, and we lose it. Kind of an unfortunate day down in Thomond. Again, we were very close to taking it. So I think this one was probably the one that got at them the most, in terms of something that we'd left behind during the season, a fixture that we definitely had the opportunity to win. And I think we're good for that. I think a lot of the Interpros Connacht seem to always do have a little bit of bite in us, a little bit of fight. But I don't know, man. I'm sorry, I'm a forward. I'm a bit old school. I fucking love the niggle. I love the in your face. Even when Marmion threw the ball at Haley, I was like, fucking hell, do it. Like, go on. Even though
Yeah,
that was stupid. Like, I don't condone it, but part of you is like, yeah, get into him. Like, and I mean,
yeah, well, like that's what we've been looking for, so we can't really
yeah,
criticize it then when it happens. That's just not very
I'm
fair
not.
to
I'm
the
saying I
lads.
love it. Like,
Yeah, I know. I was saying as kind of fans though in general, like yeah, we'll talk about that incident. I was going to bring it up later on, but people are kind of going mad over it on Twitter. I tweeted like Marmion should have done it 100%, but there's been a pattern of players, and the player that I love the most down in the Hurricane territories, Dan Coles, is a master of it. Is it's sliding in on the knees when like the ball was pretty much already down the ground, and Healy he's not trying to hurt him, and he doesn't really hurt him. But why? Like, why? You're never. It's such an unnatural movement to make when you're trying to. No one tackles like that, like in an actual game situation. So it was stupid for Marmion. Luckily he didn't get any further punishment for it. But at the same time, they need to stop this sliding because someone will get badly hurt at some stage. But you've already mentioned Marmion, Westy, Sam. We saw some monster performances, Marmion included. We saw as well some big performances in the pack. Niall Murray. And Cian Prendergast, who we were told by Paul Boyle how good this guy is. That in the first training session up, the senior players took notice of him, and we saw from them two lads monster performances.
Yeah, there was a brilliant, especially the two of them being 21. Niall Murray also said in the podcast you were doing with him there a couple of weeks ago. You had him on. You kind of asked him about players coming up through the academy who to look out for, and he name checked Cian Prendergast as well. So you must be doing something right in training that this Paul Boyle and Niall Murray both name checked him and both wanted us to be aware of him. We've seen him in kind of fits and starts this season. He's been very, very good. Probably stand out for the Eagles in the two games I've watched. Like head and shoulders above the rest of them, including the other senior pros that are in that Eagles team. And any game we've seen of him, like that Racing game, he's really made an impact. I think what I liked about him was he might not necessarily made the first up tackle once or twice, but he always made the tackle eventually. He was bounced off and like recovered, made the tackle. He looks like he can run in that like kind of short, built up sort of busy area around the ruck, and so does Niall Murray as well. He looks like he's a bit of a dancer on his feet as well. So the two lads, they were two absolutely exceptional ones. But I actually genuinely, it sounds really cliche to say after a win, but I think that every man to the 23 had a really, really important part to play in that game. It was unfortunate that McAllister and Robson McCoy were both taken off. I understand what Friend did. It was brilliant bit of changing it up so that we didn't get a yellow, concede a penalty, concede a try off a maul, and end up going into the sheds at halftime a man down and behind on the score, because those two players weren't actually that bad in open play. It was just the scrum was being dominated and something needed to be done. And what an answer he got when he made that substitution. So every single one of the 23 had the right attitude. Like you said, with Marmion, stood up, fought, really stepped to it. And it was something I was really impressed with, because, Connacht teams have lost before they've even gotten on the bus going down to Thomond time and time again. And I said it last time we played them where we were really close. I was like, that's the right attitude. And I think we're nearly there. And I was actually quite positive about it. And you would sort of said we were sick of being the nearly men. And I kind of went, I think the nearly men means that you're nearly there and we will get that over the hump. And I think they went down there with that attitude. They said, we've been so close a few times. We're just not going to back down. And they really stepped up. I was so impressed with everyone.
Yeah, 100%. We saw Westy, Marmion had a great game, and that has to be coming from obviously the competition of that place with Blade. They're pushing each other on. We saw Connor Fitz had in his major upside as well that game. I've been kind of critical of him in the past, but he was fantastic, looked very at ease. And, Tom Daly as well. We have to talk about him in his first appearance as captain. He showed real maturity, didn't he?
Yeah, I think that's where it starts really in a fixture like that. That's so gritty, and it's a fixture where the referee struggled to keep control of it at a lot of points. I think that's where it helps to have a really level-headed captain. Tom Daly's not necessarily that old; he's still pretty young. First time out captain of the team, and you would have sworn he'd been captain all season. You would have sworn that he was at least a co-captain or a member of that leadership group. I'm sure he probably is. But yeah, I think that leadership is really effective. And again, it's coming from someone. It couldn't be more deserved. The man's, again, I don't have the actual statistics in front of me, but he's probably played more minutes for Connacht this season than anybody else.
19 starts, I read this morning.
Yeah, so I mean, there you go. I mean, on a team like Connacht that does have a lot of injuries, it's fantastic to have someone like Tom who is able to play week in, week out, who's able to lead, who's, doesn't really seem to give an inch week in, week out either. He's a really physical, commanding presence on the pitch, and I think that shows. I think one of the areas that probably showed the most was in the defence from Connacht. There was so many times we actually held Munster out in positions where they would have scored normally. Even our Mull defence was better. I just think our attitude when we didn't have the ball was so much stronger. I think that's probably a statistic that rings true if you look back over the big games that we have won. When we do control ourselves in defence, when we do kind of tighten up, let's say inside our own kind of 22-meter line and start playing a bit smarter and stop giving away stupid penalties and picking our moments to go for that turnover ball, that's when we really hurt teams. And I think especially with a team like Munster, who are so good at that jackal threat and so good at the breakdown, to get a leg up in that battle was so important to win.
Yeah, exactly. The line speed was incredible from start to finish as well. The big talking point that's been kind of going around on Twitter was the, Big Papa and Jack O'Donoghue kind of small scrap, but like Jack O'Donoghue was acting like an arsehole and he got treated like an arsehole. He was doing his best Dev Toner impression there, falling through the ruck and grabbing onto legs, and Big Papa just pushed him off and he got up and wasn't happy about it. Sam, is it fair to say that Connacht played Munster at their own game here? They made it into a scrap. They made it into a sloppy kind of game, which is what Munster do to teams, and Munster didn't like it.
Yeah, I think it was really it was quite telling that I think Munster, like I said earlier, Connacht had lost before they've been on the bus down to Thomond a few times. I think Munster have that attitude when Connacht come to town as well. They go, they might put a scrap up to us, but in the end, like what nearly happened, we'll drive down and we'll get a last minute winner, or they'll mess up something, They don't have the balls to kind of see it out or whatever. And when they were being stepped to, when the subs were jumping in from both sides, it happened both ways. You can't blame the Connacht subs because the Munster subs were doing it the next time. Like when push came to shove, I think Munster were a bit taken aback by the fact that Connacht stood up for themselves and the fact that we kind of gave them that little bite back, and there was a bit of niggle. And like Damien Diolande had Tom Daly marking him, and he was not giving him an inch, and that sort of stuff all added up. So that came probably from frustration by Jack O'Donoghue. He will know himself that was a silly thing to do, and he cost his team potentially the win. But the try that was there, the ball was down and they went back to it. I was watching it going, Jesus, sign him up for the Galway Warriors, because that was an O-line block if ever I saw one. He pushed me man right out of the way of the running back. But
watching it was surreal. You're like, he can't do that's not allowed. Like, it was so strange.
But then but what happened was he was hanging on to him, much like CJ Stander was hanging on to Owen Farrell was hanging on CJ Stander before. It was like he was hanging on to his leg. Big Papa, there's a word being thrown around on Twitter, slap. I didn't see a slap. I saw him trying to shrug him off. I saw him pushing him a little bit. If it was a slap, it was the tamest slap ever. If you got slapped by Big Papa,
you're going to know about it.
But and then he decided to get up and shove him. And, for his own sake, I'm glad that Big Papa didn't react. And for Connacht's sake, I'm really glad that he did, because it cost him a try. That try would have been scored if he hadn't have done that. That was a steamrolling run, and he was just unfortunately silly error in judgment. Can't really blame him. We've praised Jack O'Donoghue this season a lot. Like, he's a great player. They're all very good players, but I think Munster were taken aback by Connacht standing up for themselves. And I think that it's kind of like the little brother finally, giving a dig back to the older brother. I don't think that they liked it too much. And, there was a few of the heads went, and the ill discipline cost them in the end. And that was the only thing that cost them. If they want to blame anything else, they can if they want. But I really just think that the ill discipline, the decision making, and a lack of execution were what cost Munster in the end of that game.
Yeah, I totally agree that whatever you said there, Sam and Westy, we have seen Munster players come out, Munster fans have come out since, and a lot of them kind of blaming the referee. And we saw CJ Stander come out and criticize the referee after the game, saying that he's on the way out soon, so he can do it.
His quote, when he said his quote was, it seemed like we were playing against more than 15, and I was kind of laughing to myself. I was like, yeah, you were. You played against a really good 23, and that's what won us the game. Our bench made a huge impact and won that game.
Yeah. And then O'Mahony was also kind of talking to the referee constantly afterwards as well. What did you think, Westy, of the refereeing performance?
Look, we've kind of said it before. Like, I don't think the overall standard of refereeing in the league is kind of as high as it should be. There does seem to be a bit of inconsistency there. But I do honestly think, most of the time with poor refereeing decisions, it tends to come down either way. It tends to come down kind of a balance on each side. You can't really say that one team necessarily is getting drastically favoured It does happen every now and again, and you do see odd decisions made. But I think, as Sam said, it was Munster's ill discipline that got them. Like Peter Mahoney gave up talking to the ref halfway through the game, and you're kind of like, well, that's not going to help. Like, if you're getting fed up with the ref, then you have to adjust your behaviour to deal with ref. That's not how. And I'm surprised at that, because I think Peter Mahoney's fantastic captain. I was surprised that he wasn't Ireland captain 5 years ago. I think as a leader and as one of the senior men on that team, you have to be better than that. It's not about it's a great thing that actually, I'll paraphrase something that Ronan O'Gara said. Like Ronan O'Gara said about coaching, that if his players aren't getting the message, he's doing something wrong. He's not teaching them right. And it's the same thing with the ref. If you feel a ref is turning against you, you're not behaving right towards them. You have to adjust your behavior. These teams they research the ref as much as they research the opposition. They should have been fully aware how the game is going to be ref, and they should have adapted when they started to lose it. You're never going to change a ref's mind by constantly shouting the same thing at him when he's telling you to be quiet and let him tell you his decision. So I think Peter Mahoney, to a certain degree, I don't want to say let himself down, but he knows far better than that. He kind of probably let as you guys said, that kind of played them at their own game. He kind of let Connacht get under his skin, and that negatively affected their relationship with the ref. That probably made it more difficult for them to get their point across. Now, again, I don't think the ref was overly biased. I think a lot of stuff, I think there was odd decisions on both sides, and I do think that we had a Limerick TMO who almost tried to take the game from Connacht at the end.
Yeah, but, she was. I was like, what? No, shut up.
I do think that like the overall ref standard isn't great, but I don't think it's biased or against one team. I think you have to behave better with a ref if you're going to start giving out about reffing decisions.
But it's quite telling that the Pro 14 had one reffing representative at the last World Cup, and that was Nigel Owens. He's retired now. We see Frankie Murphy the occasional time being a touch judge in Big Six Nations games. I think that there is definitely a weaker standard of reffing in the Pro 14. It's one of the downfalls of the league, and we've talked about it a lot on this podcast. But I think it's extremely telling, because it's regularly something we talk about on this podcast, of how the ref wasn't biased, but how he was poor and didn't have control of the game, and didn't at the weekend as well. But there was only one pundit before this week talking about it, because it was happening quite significantly to Connacht for the last few months and years. And that was Bernard Jackman. And he was talking about it nonstop, saying that the reffing was poor, and no one ever had an issue with it. And then the second it affects another team, and the second it negatively affects another team, it's all over front headline news, and like Off the Ball are doing specials on it. And I think it's kind of quite telling that like we've been shouting this out for months about the standard of reffing and how it negatively affects us and both teams, and just the standard of the games we're watching, because it's poor refereeing. Refs don't seem to talk to their touch judges at all. Touch judges don't seem to interject at all, and it's quite unfortunate. But I don't, watching back on the game, and Alan Quinlan can tell me to watch back on the game all he wants on the Off the Ball. I did, and I still didn't see it being biased. I thought it was poor lack of control, but there was no bias to it. The one questionable decision for the crossfield kick was questionable enough that I can give it the ref probably, like, whatever happened, the TMO decision was made. It's not blatantly wrong the way everyone seems to be making out the way it was. And other than that, the offside line was ref the same by both. Both teams lived offside in that game. And if the ref is allowing you to do it, you do it. And Munster were just as guilty of it, but their defense wasn't as, determined, or wasn't as aggressive as ours was. So it looked worse from our point, but they can watch it back all they want. It was a poor refereeing display, but it wasn't a biased refereeing display at all.
Yeah, exactly. And I personally, I think it's fantastic that we're talking about Connacht being cynical in areas. Like, that's what we've been crying out for. Like, the best teams are cynical. We've mentioned before about Leinster. They get away with so much. Maro Itoje lives on the offside line. Is what makes him such a great player. And this year he got called for it, and everyone was saying it was a poor year for him. Like, that's the differences. And if Connacht are like that, then I'm all for it. So it's brilliant. But enough about that. Looking at the table here, lads, Connacht sit kind of mid-table at the moment, but they are on 9 points. They have two remaining games. One is Benetton and Ospreys, I believe.
Yeah.
Who are both, Benetton sit currently top of the table on 14 points. And then Ospreys sit third currently on 10 points. But Westy, two teams very much in contention, but two very winnable games for Connacht.
Yeah, I think definitely winnable games, and I think we kind of have to look at them both. They're kind of both mirror images of each other, really. So you've got Benetton, who will have the wind at their back now. They've got off to a really good start. They will also be pretty annoyed that we stole a game from the death of them in Italy earlier during the year. And then hopefully you'll have the counter then for Ospreys. We should be pretty annoyed that we lost a game that we really should have won against them back in the sports ground a couple of months back. So again, the worrying thing for Connacht, and it goes beyond an anecdote at this stage. We don't seem to follow up big performances. I mean, we do tend to lose after we win, especially when it's a close victory. So you would hope now that this is, again, we've said it before, but there's another point in the season where we need to change that narrative now. We need to take, I think, is it this weekend or is it next weekend?
Next weekend.
Yeah, the European rugby's on this weekend, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a bit of time off to compose ourselves. We'll probably see a decent amount of rotation in the squad again. I think Friendly is looking at this competition the right way, in that although we want to get victories, we do want to keep doing what we've been doing all season and build the depth in our squad. Maybe give lads like Prendo and Murray more time to develop and grow.
Prendo. When did we start calling him Prendo?
Friendo, is it?
Yeah.
I know you're on a Prendo basis with him.
I'm on a Prendo basis with him now. I've decided that's what we're calling him now.
Is he your Irish Shannon Frizzell? Is he your mate?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I walked past him on Shop Street once. We're best friends.
I've never heard anyone call him Prendo. Did you just make that up?
I think so. I didn't even realize I said it.
We'll have to tweet him, ask him, has anyone ever called him Prendo? Because that's fantastic. Sorry, go ahead.
I've lost my train of thought now.
Yeah.
They're two winnable games, but two tough games. Two games we can't really afford to underestimate either, right? We need to go into them with level heads. We need to go into them seriously. And look, it could be a very interesting competition if we win them both.
Thankfully for Connacht fans, it is an away game, so that's good, because at home Connacht have lost, I think, unofficially 20 games in a row. But that's fantastic that that's a away game. But yeah, I totally agree. It's there for the taking. Why not go for it at this stage? Why not? We've got a few questions.
Sorry, just unfortunate. Much like the actual Pro 12 this season, it's just a one-off final. Whereas, it looks like Munster could probably get it, or Leinster or Benetton. We could win our next two games and not be in a playoff. That's kind of an unfortunate way of doing the whole format, and it's kind of it's grown out of, unfortunately, a revised format. But for me, it'd be nice to be playing towards something like, if we don't get a bonus point against Benetton, that's us out. We can't get first, so that's us out of it. And I'd like to see a playoffs, a couple of games or whatever, just to give us a few more games. I'm sure the players won't appreciate that, but sure, what can you do?
Yeah, if I was a player now, I'd be especially Ulster there, who've lost all 3 games, I'd be get me to the fucking beach quick. But whatever. We asked for a few questions on Twitter. We got a few in, all about Connacht, obviously, so there's no point in waiting until later on. First one is from Fionn, who's actually changed his name, I only realized now, on Twitter, to Fionn. Rainbow Cup is great. So Fionn, thank you very much for realizing now that it's great, but be prepared to change that in 2 weeks' time. He has said, any guesses / wishes on the replacement for Quinn Rue? We haven't heard really, there's nothing has been kind of said on the names, but I think we all agree we want, apparently the budget is there for, a player of Quinn Rue's standard. So I think we're all hoping for an NIQ that's a big second row that can really help out in the Maul, Westy, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, I might even take Donnacha Ryan at this stage, really, to be honest with you.
Friendly was asked about him on the press conference during the week, and he's still in contract. So it's obviously something they thought about, but it's no go. If
there was an Irish, I hope we don't get Devin Toner. But if there was an Irish qualified lock out there with a good level of experience, I'd be open to it. But as I said before, I think the key for us now is to bring in an already established player, someone who maybe has a bit of international experience, but at least has experience at kind of high level competition. I can't think of anybody off the top of my head who's kind of out of contract, but you'd love kind of maybe the likes of a Johnny Gray, or somebody who's just kind of in and around, just falling out of maybe rotation for that. Now I think Johnny Gray's actually come back into the Scotland squad, but somebody at that level who maybe he was a year or two ago when he's playing in the Premiership, where has international experience, has played around a little bit, has experience in different leagues, and has high intensity competition experience.
Yeah, Sam, someone sent you a player that you can't pronounce.
Yeah,
from, Georgia.
I have a Georgian one. Dave O'Connor sent me this on Twitter. It's just Konstantin Mikaudze. I'm going to pronounce it, but that might be pronounced very wrong. Yeah,
I'd imagine it is.
He's got about 60 caps for Georgia. He's 130 kilos. He's not even 30 yet. He plays for Montpellier. He's been there 4 years. Came from Toulon. Sounds the right job. I think, like Westy said, getting someone, doesn't matter Irish qualified, non-Irish qualified, whoever's available. The biggest thing for me isn't just that they're a seamless fit. You know, you want a starter, you want someone that can come in and help shore up them all. But you have Prendergast, who can potentially be a second row. You have Murray, you have Delan, you have loads of young players coming around. So I want someone that can help bring them up. When we spoke to Niall Murray, we spoke to him about players and Quinn Rue in particular, and he was singing Quinn Rue's praises in terms of like kind of coaching from a position of being more experienced and knowing the game and that side of things. And that's what you want to be replacing them with. You want someone replacing them with experience, but also who'll help bring through these young lads, because we have a raft of unbelievable youth players and we really want to harness that. And like, you look at this, the team we put out at the weekend, Murray, Prendergast, O'Brien in the center, Fitzgerald, like that's a good young basis of a team, and you want to keep harnessing that and keep kind of pushing that through. So the player that I think we get needs to be that type of player. And I know Friendy's big on attitude, so you want someone that's willing to come in and help as well as willing to come in and play.
Yeah, exactly. We haven't really heard much, but if we do ever hear anything, we will be sure to let everybody know on Twitter. Next question comes in from Mark Gurley, who asks a nice tongue-in-cheek question, but which salty Munster fan / pundit's embarrassing response to the defeat did you most find enjoyable? It was tasty, wasn't it? Those tears, they were just so tasty. Oh man, they were so upset. We're not going to name names, but like Sam keeps listening to Off the Ball to punish himself for some reason.
I don't know why
I've told you not to do it, but you still listen.
I hate it. I can't.
Alan Quillen was upset.
He was upset. They did a special on it, and what he did was he tried to come across as very impartial pundit by saying, take nothing away from Connacht, and then gave a big spiel about how you take it all away from Connacht. And it was constant throughout the whole time. And he was like, then he kept being really condescending and telling everyone to watch it back and make sure you watch it back. And if you do, you'll see. And I did watch it back, because that's what I do whenever Connacht win. I watch it back.
Yeah.
And no, I thought that it was a very weird couple of weeks for the Irish media. The players not making the Lions, the Quinn Rue like leaving Connacht, and the one comment about that, and then this kind of like disdain for the refereeing and not really much praise being leveled towards Connacht. Great display, good aggression, good game plan, all of those sort of things. I thought it was just kind of a little bit embarrassing, and we do give out about refs on this show all the time, but we're fan media, and I'm going to say that we're passionate fans, and I can understand passionate fans being annoyed. I can also kind of get a bit sick of it when it goes on to 12 tweet threads about how bad it was, and that's another story. But don't be going on national radio and talking about it and trying to pretend you're impartial, because you're not, because it was clearly obvious you weren't. And I'm never going to pretend to be impartial, because that would be silly. Like I'm not impartial. I'm never going to.
No one would believe you.
No one would ever believe me. I'm the shine, light shines out their asses kind of like blind faith sort of fan, and that's probably annoying as well. But like, I don't like this kind of seemingly impartial pundits and commentators and journalists trying to seem professional but also give out about it, because it was a bit sad by the end of it. One little comment was enough. You didn't need a 20-minute special about it.
Yeah. It was just, you mentioned that Indo article, so we were asked on Twitter last week to talk about it. All I'll say is this: we're not going to mention who it was or anything like that. Don't, and I've been guilty of this, don't tweet about it, don't retweet it, don't like it, don't talk about it, and it'll go away. Simple as that, because that's what they want. They want the rage tweets, they want all that, because that drives up readership. So the best thing you can do is just ignore it, but that's enough. I don't want to talk about it anymore. Yeah, I agree. Like, we poked fun at some of the Twitter pages that were doing it. That one you mentioned with the threads, it was like, again, it was the same thing. It was like, referee didn't cost this game, but here's 12 tweets that I made GIFs of showing things that the ref did poorly. It's like, so you obviously care. Look, I hate criticizing referees, and I hate when we do it too, because I've seen when other people do it, it looks so sad, and that's what I think we look like when we talk about it. But it's going to happen, unfortunately. It's part of the human aspect of the game, and that's what it is. But we try not to do it too much. But we'll move on to Aina's question. Aina came in with the regular listener, Aina. The first question is a rhetorical question. Who's the most underrated and underappreciated scrum half in the country, and why is it Marmion? I know Ian is a big Marmion fan, and Marmion was fantastic the weekend. And I think him having Blade there pushing him on has been fantastic. But his actual question is, if any other non-Connacht 9 dropped the ball on Healy like that, is this bitter and unprofessional nonsense even a thing? So Ian's kind of angling, is it just because it's Marmion? I don't think it is, Westy. Do you think it's just because it's Marmion, or is it just because...
I don't think it's just because it's Marmion. I think if anybody does it, like, everybody would kind of tut at it if any scrum half did it. I think it's probably still being talked about because it's Marmion, and people see him as having a kind of, maybe been a bit sour about not being in the Ireland squad, which I don't think he is. I think he's, he had bad form of injuries, and I think this year he's been working up to a really good quality, and I would be surprised if he's not called on for Ireland again. But as you say, it's great competition between him and Blade. But no, I don't think it's overly directed at him personally. I think even me and I'd say Sam as well, who are really biased, can admit, like, that's a pretty stupid thing to do. Like, you've got to try. Like, he's you can already rub that in his face. You don't have to throw the ball at him. But maybe it's again one of those things that has been now lowered against Connacht because it was such an out of control game and the ref had no control and Connacht got away with so much, even though it led to a penalty kickoff, which is a pretty good punishment.
Yeah. By the way, Sam, I think we've talked about this. If Craig Casey had the game that Marmion had, the Irish media would have wet itself. Like, they would have been so happy. Like, why is it with Marmion that he does tend to get overlooked?
I don't know. Like, I'm sick to tired of saying it. Like, Casey is a great player, lots of potential, but we're in Ireland. We have this weird obsession with making 21-year-olds into stars. Whereas, like, rugby players mature at 24, 25. Sexton was in the Irish team kind of getting towards 26. Like, you don't need to be the be all and end all at 21. Casey should be allowed to grow. And, like, same way, like, Blade is a couple of years older than him. Blade regularly has games like that. It doesn't get talked about. It happens all the time. I'm not taking it away from Casey, but there was a noticeable difference when Murray came on. I thought Murray was probably the best player on the pitch when he came on. Unfortunately, the rest of his team kind of weren't up to the same standard he was, because I thought he was running it very well. But if Casey had the game like Marmion had, yeah, you'd be like fast track him in for the Italy game, all this sort of ongoing narrative. I think Marmion plays like that more often than not. I think he doesn't get the credit he deserves. I'm blue in the face saying it. I genuinely think that all of them playing on form to their best of their ability, taking match-winning goal kicks away from them. I think Marmion is the second best scrum half in the country behind Conor Murray. And Conor Murray had 2 years of not playing to his own standards. And during that time, I think Marmion was the best scrum half in the country, but he just doesn't kick winners. So he's not a headline scrum half, and he doesn't necessarily play with a team that wins all the time. So he's not getting the headlines as much. But I thought he was criminally left out of that Ireland squad. And it was funny. It was the first time I've ever heard the mainstream media talk about a Connacht player being criminally left out of the Ireland squad. And there was like people like Brian O'Driscoll actually stepping up and saying Marmion should have been in ahead of Luke McGrath, which I was very taken aback by, because I didn't think he'd ever side on that. But no, I think he's so consistent. He's such a good player, and this competition with Blade at the moment is just bringing the best out of him after a tough year with injuries. It's not sour grapes the way people want to put it. He's just playing back into form. He's trying to get back to form. Unfortunately for him, that moment with Healy, that was a weird moment, because that happens a lot, like you said earlier, Smurf, and players should be allowed to react to it, because there's no need for it. The unfortunate thing for Marmion is he reacts to probably the softest example of that happening. Like, Dane Coles flies in, studs up and hits people, and people don't react, and it gets talked about and nothing happens. But Healy really was very, very soft version of that happening. If Healy had done it the way some players do it and hit him properly and actually hurt him, I think the conversation would have been like, yeah, Marmion had every right to do it. But because it was so soft, it actually looked like Marmion reacted to something that he thought was happening as opposed to did happen. And that's just unfortunate. And it was the slightest little black smudge on a brilliant, brilliant performance. He thinks two moves ahead of most of the pitch. Like, Marmion is such a smart rugby player, and it probably is unfortunately not appreciated enough because he plays for Connacht, and sometimes his players can't keep up with him.
Yeah, agreed. The last question comes in from Kenny, which is fantastic, and then we laugh out loud. Sam, you'll appreciate this. Wesley, it's a soccer question, so I don't know if you'll get it. But now that Leinster won the FA Cup after winning the league in 2016, are Connacht destined to lift the Rainbow Cup? I think so. I like that.
That's good. Yeah, I like that.
Wesley, do you get that?
No comment.
Leicester, they play soccer in England, Westy. So that's just to give you some backdrop.
The year they won, we won the Pro 12.
Yeah, well,
I remember
well,
stuff. 2016.
So the Rainbow Cup is now the FA Cup. So is it going to become a yearly thing? And every year we're going to have to hear the commentators talk about how there's magic about it. And you try telling those fans it doesn't matter, because that's most of what happens at FA Cup games.
And the teams don't care anymore either. So thanks to everyone who tweeted in questions. We appreciate it. And we'll try and do that more often when it comes to podcasts, because we always get questions. So, but we'll move on to Leinster versus Ulster.
Before we move on, can we just mention Stephen Fitzgerald for a second?
Sorry, of course, I
yeah.
forgot. Thank you, Westy. Yes, the sad news today that he have to retire at the end of the year due to injury. I think it was a horrific knee injury, wasn't it? And several surgeries.
Yes, a couple of surgeries over the last 2 years.
So 25-year-old came from Munster and played, I think it was 19 times, was it?
I don't know the exact stats on his
Connacht,
but he looked very good in a few games a couple of years ago, and I remember kind of thinking the two of them coming through, he was the older, and I remember thinking, Jesus, himself and his younger brother now both look quite comfortable. It was around about the time when Carty wasn't in the team because he was off form after the World Cup, and I remember thinking, oh, Conor, Stephen looked like the right jobs, and he came so highly rated, so I was getting very excited about him. Such devastatingly unfortunate news, and it just shows the reasoning behind a Quinn Roux going off if he does end up going to France or something, getting a paycheck towards the end of his career, because you deserve it, and because you don't know how long a rugby career can last. You know, if you have a good rugby career, you're retired by 36, and that's you wouldn't say that about any other job in the world. So, you know, it's heartbreaking. It's very, very sad. We wish him all the best. It's annoying now that he didn't get a send off at all this season. It's kind of just trying to get back to fitness, and then kind of finding out that you just are never going to is not an easy way to go.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks, Wesley, for reminding us. I appreciate that. Wesley, do you want to say anything about that, or are you good?
Well, just to kind of echo what Sam said, it's for a young lad, 25, like he probably would be coming to the peak of his powers in the next 2 or 3 years if he got a bit of consistent game time. I think we saw a lot of promise from him, but again, probably didn't see enough back-to-back games to see him get to that potential that he could have. And it's just an awful way to go after, the guts of a year out injured. But no, sorry, more than a year out injured. And multiple surgeries, and just to be told that you can't come back, like it's awful for the young lad. But he's clearly a fierce competitor. He's clearly a winner. Like he'll succeed no matter what he does, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. We wish him the best of luck, whatever he does next. We will move on now to Leinster Ulster. Leinster coming out on top, 21.17. The scoreline looks a bit closer than actually probably the game was. But first of all, great to see Caelan Doris back on the rugby pitch. It's been a good few months now out. So it was fantastic to see him back. But Westy, the Irish 8 jersey, which was his without doubt when he last played, it's a lot different now. The outlook is a lot different for that 8 jersey, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Considering the fact that Jack Conan is now a Lion and managed to show exactly why he's a Lion in that game. A lovely little break, some lovely little step. A big guy with that kind of pace and skill is very useful. I'm not saying at all that Doris will be back in an Ireland jersey for the summer, I'm sure. So that will be his kind of challenge now, would be to get consistent game time, get back to back, and remind everybody why he was brought up to the Ireland squad at such a young age.
Yeah, exactly. And the game, 2 strong kind of teams named out. Leinster definitely very strong. But Ulster kind of applying all the pressure in the first 15 minutes, but just couldn't break through that final kind of line of defence by Leinster, eventually breaking through sort of 18th minute with a lovely try. Nick Timoney, Stockdale and Balakoon all involved. But we've seen this throughout the year now, Sam, and we've seen it with several teams sort of outplay Leinster in the first half for large majority of the game, or for large majority of the half, and yet at halftime it's always the same score, or they're only 3 points ahead after all the pressure, and it has to be so disheartening for these teams.
Yeah, and even like Connacht 2 weeks ago when we got 16 points up, and you think, okay, yeah, now we're putting the foot in the throat, and you just don't. Leinster players are all not just brilliant rugby players, but they're also really intelligent rugby players, and they can work their way back into a game. There's a rugby intelligence that some players who are physically very gifted don't have, and it's the ability to adapt and work their way back into a game and just keep doing things over and over and over. And it might seem monotonous. I don't think Leinster are a particularly beautiful team to watch. I'm never overly like, oh yeah, the Leinster game, whereas I'm always up for watching the Ulster game. But what they do is they're so clinical and they're so attritional. I remember hearing a stat there was they scored 5 tries out of 6 trips to the 22 in a game. Like that's just clinical. That's just, you get within 5 meters, Leinster are going to score. They're just going to grind you down and do it. And that's what they can do. And, I think part and parcel of the reason why Ulster weren't allowed anything was there was a rejuvenated James Ryan there, and he really stepped up. And that's the most impressed with him I've been in well over a year at this stage. 29 tackles, I think I read. So, that sort of chip in his shoulder between himself. Ringrose really looks like he has a bit of a chip in his shoulder after the supposed Lions snub. I'm not sure if he'd get into my Lions team even if there was an injury in the centre, but they're two players that led by example and stopped Ulster capitalising on some good play, and it just made it too difficult to break down. It always just seems like they have an extra man or two in the defensive line. I don't know, we talked earlier about Munster constantly going for good jackal threats. I don't think Leinster really try and turn the ball over too much. I think that they just wait for you to make a mistake and they just grind you down by being a brick wall, and they don't really commit too many to the ruck, and they fan out and they just make it impossible to play through.
Yeah, they definitely do. Yeah, they as you said, they always seem to have someone extra there to defend. I thought Ryan Baird was fantastic as well. Like, for a lad of his age and still has a lot of size to put on, he was so physical in tackling. It was incredible. But the big talking point, obviously, of the first half, Westy, was Henshaw's tackle on Balakoon. It was, first of all, the fact that this had to be a captain's challenge and not just checked by the TMO is ridiculous in the first place. But Westy, do you want to, so it was given as no foul play. There is no direct contact from Henshaw's shoulder to Balakoon's head, but it's a dangerous tackle, isn't it? And it's not a good example to set.
Yeah, like you said, hit the nail on the head there. The fact that it went to a captain's challenge or captain's refer, whatever it's called, is a joke. Like, if TMOs are supposed to be referring this stuff anyway, how something like this isn't looked at, I have no idea. I think you're right in that, okay, there's nothing in the letter of the law because there isn't contact with the head. But I think that highlights exactly why the letter of law has to change. Like, the whole point is to lower the body position of the tackler. That's why we're giving players these. That's why we've made it stricter and players are getting red cards now. Even if a player dips, you're still at risk of a red card if you haven't made enough of an effort to dip. So I don't see how you can then not give a card to a player who tackles upright, and the only reason he doesn't make head contact is because the other guy is slightly taller than him. Like, I understand things are going to happen in a pitch where players are falling and you're standing upright and you kind of maybe go to catch them or wrap them or something, and we can look at things in open play and make intelligent decisions. I'm not saying every time a player is standing upright and he gets hit then it's going to be a yellow card, but I do think this should open the door to a more serious conversation, and that what are we actually looking at? It shouldn't take a young lad like Balakoon to get a HIA, to be concussed and out for a month and, potentially worse, for us to take a look at the actual tackles before they happen. This is a great learning experience for young lads where you say, look, he may not have hit him in the head, but he was in the wrong position, so he still got punished. Like, it's not about you gave a concussion, so now I'm giving you a red card. Now it's even. It's the whole point of these cards is to correct behavior. And you're not going to correct behavior if you just wait for every worst case scenario to happen.
Yeah,
That said, I love Henshaw. I need a great game, and I don't have nothing against him personally in this context. But it's just
this is the problem. It's a terrible tackle technique, but it was a fantastic hit. It stopped the potential try. Like, this is the problem as well, is that the fact that it was unpunished because it stops the potential try. And Henshaw isn't out to do anything malice, obviously, but it's not the right technique. He had to go off for a HIA himself, Henshaw, due to that tackle, which should really say it all. But Sam, what's your kind of viewpoint on it?
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate that there is no wording in the law that would be allow this to be punishable, because I think the only reason he doesn't make contact with the head or the neck area is complete and utter luck. The tackling technique is what is supposed to change because of the law. The whole idea of that dominant stand-up tackle is supposed to be changing due to the fact you might get a red card for hitting the head. And, after it happens a few times, you'll change your technique. And unfortunately, because this one didn't, it's not going to motivate him to change his technique. It was a dominant tackle. And before it was looked back at, a couple of people were saying, oh, it was a brilliant tackle. And yeah, it was dominant. And yeah, it was, but it was reckless and it was dangerous. And I think that the only reason he didn't connect with Balakoon is because Balakoon happens to be slightly taller than him. I don't think that came into his consideration in his tackling technique. And I think it needs to be looked at. And the law is there to try and change the technique, but the law isn't going to change the technique unless it gets rid of that reckless, dangerous, the fact that it didn't hit his head was lucky kind of thing. And outside of that, brilliant. And outside of that, I think Henshaw is probably the best defensive centre in the Northern Hemisphere, potentially one of the top in the world. But I think that tackle was reckless and dangerous. And I think the fact he wasn't punished is complete and utter luck, not good technique. Good technique can be unlucky. You can be punished for unlucky. But I think in this manner, he managed to not be punished for being lucky.
Yeah, I think Keno on Twitter said that they need to change the law a bit, lower the hitting area, basically, because at the moment I believe it's shoulder down, right?
Yeah.
So I think he was saying to move it to maybe just upper chest and down, and therefore that would have been a high tackle, and that would have changed things as well. Because
if you introduced potentially for a year or two until it became kind of part and parcel of how people do it, every jersey had to have a tackle area line integrated into the design of the jersey or something, because the moment, unfortunately, head and neck are easily identifiable and shoulder is easily identifiable, but you get to the stage where it's like in soccer with the offside rule where sleeve has to be used because it's the only identifiable thing. You can't pick nipple because everyone's nipples are all over the place and everyone's different heights and people have bigger chests and stuff. So if you did bring it in where there was like, part and parcel of your uniform or part and parcel of your jersey was having an integrated tackle line on it, the way, Canterbury used to do it all the time. They used to have two-tone stuff all the time. If you could integrate that into the design of jersey for, let's say, 5 years to change the tackle technique and to allow to help the TMOs with it, that might be something that could do. But until you did something like that, I think the chest is too vague a term. Chest is anywhere up here, up as far as the bottom of your neck. And then when you're saying it's neck, like it's very hard and it is very up to the letter of the law and it is very kind of interpretable, and that's how Henshaw's gotten away with it this time.
Smurf, I think if you lower the tackle range to like under the arms, there's only one place we're going, and it's Offload City.
Offload City! Thank God someone said it, Westy. I like to get that into at least once every podcast. But no, you're saying there about the neck being, some people have longer necks. Camille Shat would never never be high tackled. That man has the longest neck in the world. We'll talk about the positives for Ulster. Westy Madigan, come on, actually had a great impact as well. I thought Henderson was fantastic. He was playing like a pissed off player after that TMO call or after the HIA incident with Henshaw. And he was fantastic too. Thought Nick Timoney, had a great game. Balakoon, Stockdale all had glimmering parts. But Ulster now 0 from 3 in the Rainbow Cup. They had a disappointing exit from Europe. It's not been a great few weeks for Ulster. With 2 games remaining, what are we expecting from Ulster? Are they just going to try out the kids, or are they going to try and regain a bit of form to end the season?
I feel like they've been on downward spiral since I said it that the Challenge Cup was theirs to lose. So I apologize.
I told you at the time they'd come after you for that, and you deserve it.
Sorry, guys. I don't think at this point you can kind of just throw out the young lads and say season's over. I think there's still a bit of pride at stake, and I hope that there is pride at stake, because if there's not pride at stake, then that just highlights what everyone's saying about the competition being useless. Like, it's only useless if we all agree it's useless, and like as Sam said, the media kind of saying that doesn't really help anybody. I think they need to keep going with a blend of experience, right? I mean, I think Dave Shannon had a good game, but at the end of the day, he's their third string scrum half. They've fallen a bit down the ranks. People like Billy Burns maybe need a bit more time to kind of find form again. They do need to solidify who their 8 should be. Although I do think Sean Reedy had a pretty good game. I think he could do a big job for them at 8. I said Nick Timoney's quite strong as well. But yeah, I think everybody wants to finish the season on a high. I don't think you want to go out with a whimper. I think they need to kind of finish with a bang now, even if their last game is, I don't know, who is it, Zebre or something?
I don't know. I can find out, but I don't know.
Yeah, so I think there should be and still is pride at stake for Ulster, and I don't think they're going to give up. I think they're in a similar position to us, although they're slightly better off, in that they're still building depth. So good rotation in the next few games can put them in a good spot. And then, look, it's an amazingly long season when you look back at it. But 2 or 3 more weeks of mixing the old with the young is probably the best way forward for them.
Yeah, the last game is Edinburgh away.
But
no easy fixtures left, that's for sure. But Sam, looking back on Ulster season, though, a lot of positives, mostly positive. Coming second in a very competitive conference behind Leinster, pushing them the whole way, getting to a semi-final in Europe, and probably should have won that game. There's a lot of positives to take.
Yeah, there definitely is. Quite like how I was criticised by Paul Paul Boyle for saying, being happy, being close to it, and falling short, and trying to kind of use that as motivation and being the underdog. I think Ulster should do that with this season. I think that this season was a brilliant step in terms of their developing depth. They have such a strong strength and depth. No one's ever going to be able to rival Leinster for strength and depth, but they're definitely the second strongest on the island in terms of the amount of good young players they have coming through that you wouldn't kind of bat your eyes at or turn your nose up towards starting. So I think that was the main positive that came out of the season, was that they developed that through kind of necessity and also through smartly bringing players in one at a time, two at a time. Coming second without the playoff makes it seem worse than it was. If there was a playoff and there was a semi-final, everyone goes, geez, we got to a semi-final, that's great. The Leicester result will grind them. That will really get to them. And that is probably the downside to the entire season. And the pro, or the, whatever you want to call it, the Northern Hemisphere Pro 14 Rainbow Cup Limited, or whatever it's called, they'll probably just want to forget about it. I don't think that they can pack it in right now. There's 2 games to get there. There's 2 games to continue to rotate players. They've been smart about doing it all season, and they continue to do it at the weekend. So I think that they should continue on for that. But I don't think if they even lost that, it would be too much of a dampener on the season, which I think overly in the league when it mattered was positive. The Challenge Cup, they put up a bit of a fight, and they probably feel a bit aggrieved by it and use that as motivation next year. I think all the provinces have actually used the Rainbow Cup really smartly to integrate a lot of youth. You look at the Connacht team that started the last day and the Munster team that started the last day. There was probably about 8 or 9 first team players mixed with 6 or 7 what you call reserves or sub players on both teams, and it was brilliant to see. And same with this like Ulster team, you're looking at players getting a lot of game time this season, a lot of young players coming through, and that's only going to help them in the long run. So I wouldn't be too upset about the season. I think that the Challenge Cup defeat to Leicester and the manner in which it happened will probably be the thing that sticks with them over the summer, and they'll use as motivation to try and drive on next season.
Yeah, exactly. We'll finish on the Southern Hemisphere kind of competitions. We're not going to go into too depth because there's too many games, but Australian teams got an absolute hammering, apart from Western Force, who put up somewhat of a decent fight. Westy, is it too much to read into that after week 1, or is it just a coincidence that the Australian teams all of them got bet?
I don't know if it could be a coincidence, really. I mean, Brumbies were pretty close as well. I think that came down to the last kick. I think the unfortunate kind of headline from and I'll caveat this in a second, but the unfortunate headline from the tournament is that first game out, Highlanders, who were mid-table to bottom of Super Rugby Aotearoa, come out and beat the champions, and okay, and even Highlanders are still, don't have Shannon Frizzell, they're missing a few players, like it's not necessarily strongest outfit. Now, I will say the finals were the weekend before, and of course, Reds are in them. And I do think that the Reds Brumbies final was much more attritional than the Super Rugby Aotearoa final. So you're seeing a bit of a kind of recovery phase for them, I think. But it doesn't look great, Stephen, to be honest with you. And you know what? I was thinking about it earlier today, and I have a busy weekend. I was like, Jesus, will I find time to watch that now? I want to find time to watch it this weekend, or will I take a break from it? So I think that's. No, I will. I caught myself. I was like, no, I'll watch as much of it as I can, as I always do. But I found that thought creeping in, where you're like, the Kiwis have it here, don't they? Like,
yeah. The most disappointing headline actually was the Hurricanes won. That was the most disappointing. Sam, talk about the Hurricanes. Keep it under 15 minutes, possibly, please.
Keep it under 70, as in like the Hurricanes only got 64 points. 17 tries. Like, people can be as snobby about the Southern Hemisphere as they want and talk about, all no defense and all this sort of stuff. If you're trying to market the sport for foreign investment or for growing and expanding the viewership, games with 17 tries are far more enjoyable than 6-3 wins in a rainy sports ground. I'm just saying, like, that game was a cracker because there was a lot of missed tackles, which allowed a lot of good open play. It's one of the reasons a lot of American football aficionados will watch college ball over NFL, is because there are mistakes. It's not so precision, and mistakes allow for a more expansive game. So I was chuffed for Canes to really get going. And from a New Zealand rugby point of view, Julian Savea playing well is good news. And that was kind of the comeback. He's played a few games this season and kind of threatened to get going, and that was him in full bus mode. So
I'm not going to lie, Sam. When I first realized the strategy was to only have one brother play well at a time, I didn't see what you were building to, but I get it now.
yeah, it's smart. It's smart. But
chess not checkers, Westy. Chess not checkers.
there was some good games. And Westy made the point. Like the Highlanders beating the Reds. That's unfortunate. Highlanders played a weird game in that game though. Like it was the least Super Rugby yards row of all the games, and that's kind of the way they've been all season. It was a bit more kicking for territory and stuff, and the Reds definitely were just tired after it. I think that the competition will continue to grow, and I hope that this becomes the annual Super Rugby to replace what was the Super Rugby with South Africa in it. Because you've got the two teams, the Pacific Island teams, coming into it in the long run as well next year, the year after. So I hope the Trans-Tasman is the new format, because it does, like Super Rugby Arturo is enjoyable, but the same 5 teams week in, week out, it's like a European Super League in soccer. It will get boring. So if you've got the 10, 12 teams, that'll be a far more enjoyable tournament. After week 1, Australian teams are at the bottom 5. I don't think it'll finish like that. I think it'll be a good mix. I still think Crusaders will walk it, but I think, you could have Reds up close. You have Brumbies up close as well. I think that it's still up for a bit of debate.
Oh yeah, the Hurricanes will come back down to the bottom of the table where they belong.
Hurricanes want a dogfight, man.
Yeah, they don't want it easy.
It was typical that as soon as Rob Kearney came back, Force started losing again. That's all I'm saying. What a great run of Force.
Let it go, Westy. It's been over a year now.
There was a beautiful blast from the past in the Blues game as well. Stacey Illy, former Connacht player playing for Melbourne Rebels. Like, I like catching up with Connacht players. You see them the odd time, players that played for us popping up all over the place. For Western Force, Kyle Godwin's captain of them this season. And then I just saw that Nuala Dawai, who scored the winner against Wasps, when John Muldoon pulled the wool over the ref's eyes and told him that the new laws had come into play, and the ref said okay, and he touched it down for the try that Cardi converted. He was playing for the Seawolves the other day as well in the MLR. So I like seeing the former Connacht players showing up around the place. It gets me a little bit more invested in teams.
Yeah, as well. I just want to highlight Squidge's tweet was funny during the week. He was saying, like, when Hoskins, the Tutu, realizes he's the best player in the world, we're all in trouble. So I thought that was quite good too, because the man is incredible. But
that basketball pass was beautiful.
Yeah, he's a.
And to think Andy Friend said we had him signed.
He never said that they were close to signing him. They just identified him.
That's not what I heard.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We'll wrap it up there, boys. I appreciate it as always. We'll be back next week, I'm sure. For those who like to listen to the basketball podcast, they'll be starting back up again now that the playoffs are commencing this evening. So keep an eye out for them later this week or early next week. So, boys, appreciate it as always, and we'll do it again next week. Chat to you then.
Bye.